All right, everybody, let me ask you a question. Is climate change causing Major League Baseball hitters to hit more home runs? What do you think of that? Well, let's talk about it. And I'm going to give a very critical review of a paper that was just published in the Journal of the American Meteorological Society on that very subject. And I'll also, at some point, I'll kind of tell you how they're kind of right, or how they, scientifically, physically, yes, there's an aspect of what they're saying that's true, but a lot of this is, I'm not downplaying the research. I'm saying that they left out a lot of variables and drew a lot of conclusions. So, baseball fans, Astros fans, welcome to Mondays with Mike. It is Monday, April 10th, and coming to you live from the studio here where I'm all alone, which is nice. It's nice and peaceful in here. So what I have is a scientific research paper that was released just a few days ago. And again, this comes out of Dartmouth University, which, is an Ivy League. So it's an Ivy school. So they know what they're talking about, right? So the authors of the paper were Christopher Callahan, Nathaniel Dominy, Jeremy De Silva, and Justin Mankin. And they come out of various departments. They're not atmospheric scientists, though. They're not physicists, but that's okay. That's fine. So let me just read you the abstract of the paper, which is sort of like the theme of it, what they're looking to prove or disprove, and their hypothesis and so forth. So here we go. All right. Home runs in baseball have risen since 1980, driving strategic shifts in gameplay. Myriad factors likely account for these trends, with some speculating that oh my God, I'm sorry, this is so dumb. If somebody told you home runs are increasing across Major League Baseball since 1980, where on your list of reasons would climate change or global warming be? Like number 3,000? Okay, you've got designated hitters, you've got baseball analytics, you've got smaller ballparks, you've got strategy shifts from hitting base hits and stolen bases toward getting home run hitters. Managerial changes. There's so many things. Like in the first paragraph, let me read this again because it's so ridiculous. Myriad factors likely account for these trends, with some speculating that global warming has contributed via a reduction in ballpark air density. Now, they say some speculating. Some who? Who's speculating that? You are, because you wrote the paper, right? Can you tell I'm getting fired up? Listen, I'm not a denier or whatever about global warming. I'm just saying this is dumb. So they don't say who's speculating. I say they're speculating that global warming has contributed to increase home run hits via a reduction in ballpark air density, which, by the way, should also make the pitches go faster. Thus, all right. So in their study, they used observations from 100,000 Major League Baseball games and 220,000 individual batted balls to show that higher temperatures substantially increase home runs. They isolated human-caused global warming with climate models, finding that 500 home runs since 2010 are attributable to historic warming. Adaptations such as building domes on stadiums or shifting day games to night games reduce temperature's effects on America's pastime. Our results highlight the myriad, it's the second time they've used the word myriad, ways that a warmer planet will restructure our lives, livelihoods, and recreation, some quantifiable and easily adapted to, as shown here, many others not. So Major League Baseball now has to shift their games to nighttime and build more domes, because according to this paper, an incremental fraction of a rise in game time temperatures is changing the game. It's not, the players aren't changing the game. It's not that the batters are getting better. It's not that the ballparks are getting smaller. It's not that some players are using performance enhancing drugs. It's not that more pitchers have gotten busted for using stickum to increase the rotational speed of their pitches. It's not that. It's climate change. Can you tell I'm fired up? Dartmouth University. Okay. And so in the paper, they do a fair amount of analytics, and part of it is just them discussing the rise in again, this is like a rise in global, they're taking this rise in global temperatures and attributing the rise in home runs to it. And I'm going to show you some graphics here in a minute that I also, by the way, tweeted out. And I tweeted one of the authors on this paper to see what he had to say about it. So they have a few charts here that show observed trends in home runs. Okay, and they show it's a chart here from 1960 through the year 2020. And of course, you can see that there have been more home runs hit since the year 1960 to the year 2020. Okay. I mean, there was the Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa era, right? Remember that? Barry Bonds era, remember that? I mean, if you remove those three guys, right? Not to mention all the others. So, of course, there's been a positive home run trend. Ballpark temperature trend, they're showing, has gone up from the year 2000 to the year 2020, although it dipped. And then they're calculating air density based on that. Now, one thing I will say is that they are correct, and this isn't some groundbreaking research on their part, but they are correct that warmer and more humid air is going to be offer less air resistance than dry, colder air. And that's just because of the molecules that make up air. So air is made up mostly of nitrogen. And nitrogen is two nitrogen atoms that are bonded together, an N2 molecule that has a weight, and we don't have to worry about grams per mole or whatever, but it has a weight of 28. Let's just say this is 28. This weighs 28. Second, you have oxygen that makes up 21%. That's two oxygen molecules, bam, together as an O2. That has a weight of 32. Water, as you know, is H2O. So that's two H's and an O. So the O has 16 and the H's each have 1 because hydrogen's the lightest element. So water vapor has a weight of 18. Okay, so what happens when you have nitrogen, which is 28, and oxygen, which is 32, and then you mix in more of something that weighs 18, yes, the air is less dense. There's less mass, and so there's going to be less resistance on a baseball. It'll also, there'll be less curvature on a curveball as well. So yes, they're right in that regard. But like I said, they're not breaking any new ground on that one. I mean, even I know that, and I'm just the weatherman, right? So they make a lot of correlations based on game day temperature and home runs. And they do some fancy statistical regression lines with it. A Poisson regression line for anybody who's ever done that. And oh gosh, they're talking about that the pitchers are experiencing more heat-related stress. So if the average temperature has gone up by a fraction of a degree, I mean, let's look at their very own chart here. They're saying ballpark temperature trend has gone up from 25 to 26 degrees C since 1980. So 1 degree C, so that's a little bit less than 2 degrees Fahrenheit on average. And I don't know if they're adjusting for the fact that Oh my, there's so many problems with this paper. The Tampa Bay Rays were not in the league in 1960. Therefore, you're going to have more hot weather games because now you have a game in Tampa. The Florida Marlins did not exist in 1960, and so therefore you did not have games being played in Miami. I mean, of course, the games are going to be cooler when you have the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Yankees and the Detroit Tigers. Of course, those games are going to be cooler. But when you expand to the South and you've got games being played in the South, oh, Minute Maid Park, I don't know. Are they going and looking at every game and figuring out if the roof was open or closed? I don't know. So they're saying one of the reasons that there's more home runs being hit is that they don't have any. Did they ask a pitcher? That's what I want to know. I want to know that Mr. Callahan, Domini, Da Silva, and Mankin, did anybody call Roger Clemens? Did anybody call Nolan Ryan and say, hey, when it's hotter out, do you give up more home runs because you're tired or sweaty or something? They didn't quote any pitchers in here. Not that I can see. All right. So let me show you some because I'm getting heated here. You see, it's global warming is getting to me. I'm getting kind of heated. I mean, they're actually saying that they think that Major League Baseball should make structural adaptations such as adding domes to stadiums to dampen the influence of climate change on hitting home runs. All right. This is an insane paper. It's just an insane paper. And then at the end, they're talking about being a burden on the poorest and most vulnerable people, risk of wildfires, heat waves, droughts, tropical cyclones. I thought this was about home runs. Increased heat stress for ballpark staff and patrons. Increased heat stress for people going to baseball games. So now not only now do we have to worry about hurricanes and tornadoes and wildfires and the acidification of the ocean and the disappearance of coral reefs, but now we have to worry about the fact that we're going to have to buy more ice cold beer at the stadium because we're going to be hotter, because that's what this paper says from Dartmouth University. All right, so let me throw a couple of things at you here. And by the way, they have this long equation that they use to calculate in the air density and climate change's effect on air density and how it affects the baseball. I'm going to share my screen and show you a few things that might have more of an influence than global warming on home run hitting in baseball. And this is coming from somebody who is a casual baseball fan. I'm not like Sally McDonald, our morning anchor, who's a huge baseball fan, or Nate Griffin, who's who is a sports expert, and Mark Berman, who's a sports expert. I'm coming strictly as a casual baseball fan. So let me go ahead and share my screen here because I want to show you some information. I'm getting fired up here. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at here are two charts. This is from baseballreference.com. I don't know if they consulted baseballreference.com in their paper from Ivy League Dartmouth University, but this is a chart that shows on the left side home runs per game since 1920. Okay. And what you'll notice here is a trend that since over the last 100 years in Major League Baseball, there have been a lot more home runs. Yes, there are some ups and downs. There's the so-called dead ball era. There also were pitcher advantages in the I don't know if they mentioned it in this paper from Dartmouth University about the height of the pitcher's mound. If they did, I certainly don't remember seeing it, but the pitcher's mound was raised from 10 inches to 15 inches back in the 40s or 50s. And so through the 50s and 60s, you had these pitchers like Bob Gibson and stuff that were just slinging the ball. and they were coming at the batters from 15 inches, a 15-inch pitcher's mound, and not a 10-inch pitcher's mound. So you'll see there in the middle there between the 1960 and the 1970s, well, between 60 and 80, you see that there are fewer home runs that are hit. I think the pitcher's mound was lowered again in either 1969 or 1970. Now, I also want to turn your attention to the right-hand graph, which shows strikeouts per game. Now, Dartmouth University, if your conclusion is correct that heat stress caused by global climate change on pitchers, they're tired because of the heat, and so they're giving up more home runs. Well, strangely enough, they're also throwing more strikeouts. So to the authors of this paper, that's something you didn't really take into account, did you? They have been throwing more and more and more strikeouts per game during this era that you say that they're so stressed by heat that they're giving up more home runs. I mean, look at the increase in strikeouts. So as a casual baseball fan, I will tell you my analysis. The strategy in baseball now is to hit home runs. Everyone loves the long ball, okay? Everyone loves the long ball. What sells tickets? Home runs, okay? What gets players giant contracts? Hitting home runs, okay? Everybody, what gets viewership? When players hit home runs, okay? Nobody is really into small ball now like they used to play. At least very few teams are. Small ball meaning dink, you know, you have a leadoff runner who's really fast, and he doesn't hit home runs. He just hits a base hit and he gets on first base. Then he steals second base. And then you get somebody to ding a blooper to right field, and then that drives the run home. That's small ball. Long ball is you hit as many home runs as you can. And if there are players on base, then that's even better. So that is what is happening here. At least I think you can make an argument that that's having a much bigger impact on home runs per game than climate change is, wouldn't you say? Let's see. I want to show you some other things here because I'm getting upset. And okay, here's another correlation for you. Home runs hit per game in Major League Baseball versus attendance. So Major League Baseball attendance per game has gone up steadily since 1901. And home runs hit per game has gone up steadily since 1901. Also, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has gone up steadily since 1901. So are we saying that maybe if baseball players have more money and their investments are doing better, then they feel more confident to swing for the fences? This is the last one I'll show you because I know it's getting boring. I'm not really mad. It's just I just think this, and I'll tell you what set me off here in a minute. But so this is to my point of home run hitting, long ball versus small ball. This chart overlays home runs versus stolen bases. And yes, stolen bases were much, much, much more common in the early part of the 20th century. You averaged 3 stolen bases per game in the year 1900. This latest year, we averaged just over 1 stolen base per game. Not a lot of players steal bases anymore. Much more players hit home runs. When you look at a home run per game basis right now, we've been near this peak ever since the age of the performance-enhancing drugs in the late 1990s. And then it's not a coincidence that you see there. Let me see if I can make this smaller so it's not getting blocked. But it's not a coincidence that you see there in the late 1990s that all of a sudden home runs go pew. Why? Because they cracked down on all the people using the performance-enhancing drugs. And then it gradually worked its way back up. And notice that stolen bases go way down. So stolen bases were very popular in early baseball. They dropped very low in the 1950s. Then you had in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you had this resurgence of stolen bases because you had Lou Brock in the 1960s and 70s, I think, and you had Ricky Henderson in the 70s and 80s, and they kind of brought back the idea of having this speedy guy that stole a lot of bases. And so therefore, it makes sense that you're going to have fewer home runs because you're not going to swing for the fences. If you have people on base, you try to hit a base hit to get the guy home. You don't run the risk of hitting a pop fly and ending the inning. So here's the point, and I'm not trying to like disparage the people who wrote this article or this scientific paper. But here's the thing. The media, Fox, the Associated Press, NBC, CBS, CNN, all of these news organizations picked up this story. And what did they do? They put a headline that says, climate change causing more home runs hit, study says. Okay. But none of those, I doubt if many of those reporters or producers or news writers actually read this with a skeptical mind or with a, analysis, really looking at it and saying, okay, well, does this make sense? Okay. Yes. The physical mechanism that they are talking about, okay, because they also did, to their defense, they did look at some baseball like next generation statistics where they looked at launch angles, how fast the ball came off the bat and stuff like that. And yes, they can show that a warmer, more humid atmosphere will allow more of those balls to travel. But a lot of this stuff is absolute nonsense. The thing about the pitchers being tired because they're hot and it's just, the point is that they are ignoring 100 other variables. I mean, they use the term myriad. They didn't name any of the other variables, or they didn't name many of them. Okay. But it's obviously in their self-interest for this to be a headline that climate change is causing more home runs. And then, because it's not a coincidence that a lot of these guys make their living off of that. But anyway, the American Meteorological Society decided to publish it in their bulletin, which I think is, this is a silly paper to put in your bulletin, I think. It might be a fun paper. I think the lead author or one of the authors here, I think it was Christopher Callahan, put on his Twitter that this was sort of a lighthearted paper. Okay, I'm for that, but that didn't come across in this. Bottom line is that when you make these trivial things, when you take something that is important, like air pollution and water pollution and people's health and risks of climate change, and you make them so trivial like this into stuff that's so easily debunked, that it's sort of, I think it hurts their cause more than anything else. So anyway, hey, I hope you had a great Easter. So anyway, I didn't mean to come off as a jerk, but I just, stuff like this, it made me so mad this morning because we reported on it and I was like, this is so dumb. So anyway, if you are in the Department of Anthropology or Geography at Dartmouth College and you want to call me out for this, then go ahead and do it, because I will stand by. I'll go to the sports station, Sports Talk 790, and I'll talk to guys who actually played baseball and ask them if any of this is true. So anyway, that'll do it for this lighthearted edition of Mondays with Mike. Maybe I didn't sleep enough last night. I don't know, but I think I'm on to something. So thanks to, today's also National Siblings Day. So I want to give a special shout out to my brother, Neil. We did show our pictures on the news this morning of us when we were little kids, and it was a cute picture. And shout out to my mom as well for watching the whole episode. They're probably wondering, what's wrong with me? Why is Mike so angry? I'm not. I got fired up at this article. Thank you for watching Mondays with Mike. See ya.